Troll.
Yes. Hello,
Okay.
everyone. I'm pretty sure you are aware of the latest attempt at a color revolution in Latin America. Are any of us surprised?
Not really.
No,
Not
not given the
really,
last
not
few
at all.
years. The US has been trying to fucking insert its sausage into Cuba for a long enough time as it is now, but has been very it's up the heat up over the last sort of 11, 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie. The other thing is this. Literally, it's not the only time the United States is gonna try to go into Latin America. I remember one of my Maoist friends made a joke when it came to like Peru, like what's happening there, their presidential crisis, even though I hate Castillo. Jesus Christ. Gonzalo should just like
Oh,
something that I don't want to
yeah.
mention, but
Let's keep this on topic.
Yeah.
There's all the issues that are going on in Haiti right now and Chile completely silent. Oh, but a few fucking worms and Miami and freaking Cuba are apparently protesting.
Yeah. Oh, can I say something? When it comes to Haiti, not gonna lie, I'm gonna sound conspiratorial, but this doesn't really sound conspiratorial. I just feel like it reminds me of that Bad Batch episode that just got released, like making a deal with the devil, where like Moise like basically was just their puppet, so they just assassinated their puppet so they can make an excuse to basically come in and intervene.
Yeah.
It sounds like to me, but
don't
continue.
we love it? Don't we love how Miami Cubans, doing what they always do, like the cowards and the worms that they are, bootlick for the United States to inflict misery on their own people in Cuba. Which are they really their own people? Considering they've essentially, basically stabbed their own country in the back because God forbid Castro took away their slaves.
Oh
I mean,
God.
this is a bunch of fucking white Spaniards that treat themselves as if they're fucking they ascribe themselves as certain like frail form of minority of blackness or whatever the hell they want to see themselves as by using this frail term Latin American as if they're some oppressed person. Yet when you look at these people that want to look at themselves like they're oppressed and all that, they're not only colonizers, but they identify themselves as white whenever it comes to survey or putting themselves forward towards politics or anything like that. So for all of their we're minorities, we're oppressed, you can't call us worms in Spanish, otherwise it's a racial slur of some sorts. It all comes it's all a juxtaposition to how they actually are, which is a bunch of fucking white labor aristocrats to capitalists of a varying degree.
They're like authoritarianism. They're like either like slaves. Oh my God, my slaves been taken away. Why? Oh fuck. These are just like a bunch of fucking white people who are just mad that they lost their slaves and they lost their sugarcane fields, only for it to go to the Soviets. But but literally, that's all they are. They're just outraged white people, and they're just like mouthpieces, in my opinion. Jesus Christ, I can't stand Gusanos. Like, even though I'm not much of a fan of Cuba, I just can't stand them. Like, Jesus Christ, like Gusanos. Like, oh my God. And then you had these like bread tubers or these like social fascists who want to go like Gusano is a racial slur. They don't even know what a fucking racial slur is, because even if it would slap them in the face, if somebody would slap them in the face with a slur, literally, I could just call them a fucking cracker.
But the Cuban people call them, worms. So how is it racist when the Cubans call them that too?
Yeah, mind you, the Cubans calling them it, a lot of them descend from African American slaves that have been dragged over there, and there are still the few indigenous Cubans that are left too. But a point that I would like to lay out, I have a friend who's a Miami Cuban, and he pointed out to me that it's very funny, the irony of white, especially upper class Cubans, but it's not even just upper class, it comes to Spanish culture. This does white Cubans and just colonizing Spaniards in general, trying to accuse people of racism, because these people are not only just extremely homophobic to the point where not only do they use the F word pretty much every second word, but they have about 150 different words to use the F word. But it also comes into the they are very racist. They they don't have their own kind of N word because they're not a racially discriminated group, but they do use the actual N word a lot.
Yeah, I see that a lot as well. Like, literally, they just like love to like. Here's the other thing. It's also the other thing. If like you're in New York as well with these gusanos as well. Like in New York, they think that like they can just like say the N word whenever the fuck they want
Oh,
because it's
I will try and stop you there though. A lot of from what I've been told, New York and Cubans are miles over Miami Cubans when it comes to shit like that. They're a little more
Miami
progressive.
Cubans, let's just be honest. Miami Cubans are just fascists.
Can I say
Most of them
something?
are fascists.
Can somebody just sink Miami? Can somebody just throw it into the fucking ocean? Just sink
Once
Florida
they've
because
done
no one
France,
thinks they're great. Like literally, just sink Florida at this point because I'm just tired of fucking Florida.
if you
Florida is
can
just literally some shithole.
if you can
Fucking
get rid of
sink it at
France,
this
I'll get rid
point.
of Florida. How about that? You get rid of France, I'll get rid of Florida.
Wait, what? Get rid of France and Florida or
Yes.
something like
At the
that?
same time, even better.
Okay,
But,
deal.
Yeah. Oh
what's
wait,
it?
get
And the
rid of
south
you.
of England, just like make
Oh,
the nuclear blast to wiping out France so big that it just clips off the south of Britain.
well, okay. Regardless how everybody feels about Cuba, regardless if you think it's socialist, regardless if you like Cuba,
They
yeah.
deserve freedom.
don't the Cubans have a right to decide for themselves what they want? Okay,
Oh,
okay.
can,
A
can I
self-determined right.
Can I say something? There's also other things when it comes to the protest because there's a bunch of factions I heard there in the protests. This is what I got from like Paul Moran's server, where like some people said like there's like some people who are like pro government but just like want like more actual like socialist policies actually implemented, and then there's like some people who are just like counter protest the pro government people like who are the majority like just counter protesting those like gusanos and those like people who are like wanting a color revolution, and there's just like some people who like want the blockade fucking off. Oh, and also there was a whole UN resolution and literally like 100 over like 164 countries voted to end the blockade, and only the United States and Israel voted to keep it.
Which goes to show you just how spineless the freaking UN is.
But
I know, right?
but I mean, what's it? It's one thing that they do. They're trying to make sure it's cornered off and cut off so that rather than it breaking to an open world where everyone can dive in, America gets the put in. But the thing is as well. What was I gonna say? There's something that was just like a really funny little side fact. But oh yeah, so Marxists in Cuba that are against the government, or maybe not entirely against the government, but are against the current elected government, the current officials in place, or their lack of socialist policies is more so what they're against. They, there are a lot of Marxists in Cuba that are disillusioned by the government. Some that will still follow it by, but because of the way in which they have a faith in their government, as most people do in any country around the world. But there's a lot of people that have taken a position against. Some are Trots, some are MLs, but it comes into a position of what do these Cuban Marxists want out of it, and how is it going to go about, and what position is it going to put the country in? Because the country's in a really precarious position now, where it's got to be careful. Anyone stepping onto its borders, I mean figuratively, are a threat to it, and the virulence of the Cuban people has kept them safe in the last decade. It made it much harder for the US to try and meddle into it on the more economic incentivization methods. But that's not the hardest method in the US toolbox, and that puts Cuba in a pretty spooky position right now when it comes to what will the US do next to cripple that economy further than it already has over the last, 60 years now?
Well,
yeah.
That's the thing. If these people that support the color revolution really cared about fucking the Cuban people, living under tyranny or freedom, they'd fucking, demand that their own fucking
Authoritarianism.
government, they would demand that their own fucking government lift the fucking blockade and let the fucking Cubans trade with the rest of the damn world.
Well, do you know what? Sorry to ram in as well. I know I am saying a lot, but this is a point as well to it. Okay, so you want a government to be changed. You want to break it down. Now, I completely agree with like. Well, I don't agree. I mean, I agree that the logic that beating it down like this is probably the most effective one, just on that basis. But think about this, like logically, from you're an average American democracy person, because we've got to think about how we convince Americans against this. Not just communists, not just radicals, Americans, because anti-war needs to be shot across the board. The way we've got to convince this is we've got to turn around and point out to them, okay, in desperation, being bombed, nothing else to latch onto. What are these people going to do? America wants them to engage in democracy and change their government out. If the US really wants them to do that, why don't you let democracy actually happen? No, I actually see Cuba as a democracy. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm saying just from the perspective of a liberal American, you put that onto their plate, and they're going to have a fucking shitfest trying to confirm otherwise that that's not the case. That bombing isn't going to liven it up. No, bombing, even in a democratic country, limits democracy because what will the people choose? Liberty or safety? Because that is an actual choice you have to make when you're in a position like this. There is no grey area. There is no if or but. The grey area exists, but not as a choice. The grey area is a failure to achieve either. And if you fail to achieve either, you end up falling to the worst of the two. I mean, it'd be like my perfect example would be revisionism. They went down the middle line. They involved marketeering, profiteering into a socialist system. And where did it end? At the worst point. Capitalism 40 years later. And that's what I mean. The Cuban people are at a sort of the American idea of democracy and whatever the fuck they've got pulling out of their ass, if they really want to rub their stomachs at night, these aristocrats and all these other people that support the colonialization of Cuba, they will let it breathe. You can't vote if you can't breathe. Yes.
Can I say something? Basically, the gray area is basically not an option, really. And also, like, the other thing is this, like, Cuba has always, like, basically been stuck with these sugar chains, really, for its entire fucking life, really. Cuba has always been stuck with the same old fucking sugar canes. Basically, literally, they only depend on sugar, and the real reason why the United States even wanted Cuba in the first place is because it's profitable to grow more fucking sugar canes and basically just enslave the population for more sugar.
It's no surprise that America had to move to fructose corn syrup for a lot of products when they lost Cuba.
Oh, as well as no wonder why there was the Spanish-American War as well. And also, me as like a Maoist, like everyone knows my stance on Cuba. Like, watch my video where I was talking about Cuba and stuff like that, which I pissed a lot of people off, but who cares? But me, like, the other thing is this, like, I believe it's not socialist, like, but at this point, like, who cares about that? Because, like, now you just have some, like, color revolution just happening, really, nowadays. Which, that's the other thing. People should look at color revolutions when it's happening and actually, like, know the signs of a fucking color revolution. That's the other thing.
I mean, a better name needs to be given than even giving them the fucking nickname of revolution. It's imperial, like I guess that a shit name would be imperialist insurgents, or a better name would be imperial terrorism. But it's certainly not. Maybe a lot of them do start off from something that could actually be a very natural revolution, because the reason why there would be the reason not in Cuba, but in certain places, there would be legitimacy to that idea. Because I know why they're called color revolutions, don't matter. But this is an old tactic that was designed by the British against the Ottomans. It has actually how Israel was made. Although that was after the Ottomans, it was still part of that tactic. I mean, it was actually one of the first instances of the tactic. Send British people over there, colonize, and then get involved in the more radical movements that are supposedly against oppression there, and sort of lance it out and build these colonial states like South Africa and Israel and other places like that out of the ruins of these places, as you diametrically oppose them between the Europeans and the natives. It's really easy to win a battle against your actual enemy once you've weakened them by fighting together against a perceived enemy. That was actually the West's idea about defeating the Soviet Union in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Weird.
Yeah, that's true.
Honestly, to me, it doesn't matter if Cuba is socialist or not. The very fact that the United States of America is even doing what it's doing to Cuba forces it to be in a position where it may have to trade with other imperialist powers out of necessity. It's not like they want to; they're forced to, because you can't. A country like Cuba just doesn't have the resources that the imperialist countries have.
There's a difference between trading and being in a trade organization. They are two big different things. But more so, the point I would lay out, we need to put aside its history for a second. Now, I know that sounds a bit undialectical, and I'm not saying put it aside for the actual analysis. I'm saying put it aside for a second and think of this like it's any other third world country with its own history of being oppressed by imperialism. Because we need to remember one thing here. We're not in that fancy pants 20th century anymore, where the idea was that we can just build these socialist countries and we're going to build up and then socialism has control over the globe. No, because we failed to properly implemented socialist economics and society and all that, but the Cultural Revolution didn't come into the Soviet Union, it came in China, so that was broken away from that development. We didn't properly properly reach the meat, the heart, the iron core of the first negation. We managed to plummet. We managed to penetrate into it. We managed to reach a point where we had built a stable socialist economy and society, but we had not gone any further than that. Everything regressed backwards from there and fell on its ass. And what was one of the biggest problems, not just the labor aristocracy, or that they were probably one of the biggest problems with their reviews proletarianization, it was imperialism. And imperialism, the biggest issue we had is that the squabbling between the USSR and China, you had the fact that they were then supporting nations against each other. China was supporting imperialists themselves, siding with the US and other countries like that. And then we had these anti-imperialist countries, a lot of the time abandoned by pretty much everyone other than the DPRK or Cuba, that were struggling themselves about and collapsed. We see where we need to pick things up already there. Anti-imperialist nations that embody that idea of, places like Nasser's Egypt and other Pan-Arabist nations, those peoples that stood against imperialism, regardless of whether they are fully in our little socioeconomic camp. So it's the same with Cuba. Cuba might have a capitalist mode of production at this point now. It's pretty, all the trade that's been coming in from America, other stuff like that, the tourism, all that stuff has had a toll on the society. But that toll is not a reason to let it plummet. This would be the same argumentation people made for the Iraq War the second time. Even if they didn't believe it, they would still turn around and still justify Saddam as a bad man because what he did in the 90s as well. And you know what? They're not on about him gassing the Iranians. They're on about something that didn't happen, which was him shooting kids in incubators. They didn't give a fuck about the Iranians. If you think the American populace give a shit about the Iranians, you're mad.
They only care about the Iranian refugees that left, who are supporters of the Shah. That's the only Iranians they give a fuck about.
Give a fuck is still a big word in that equation.
Yeah, I know. But also, the other thing is this, literally to me, in my opinion, I believe Cuba was always a capitalist nation, never really achieved socialism,
That's not the point of contention here. That's the point we're making out, is that we don't need to make these positions because we don't want to split everyone up so they're arguing about this. We need people together talking about the issue.
It's my position is it should be the Cubans and only the Cubans that decide how they want to govern themselves and how they want to build their path to socialism. It's not up to me. It's not up to you. It isn't up to the U.S. government, especially to dictate how they should fucking live their lives. God forbid these the people in Cuba don't want to suffer the boot of American white supremacism. God forbid. That's the only crime. That's the crime Cuba has really committed. It isn't being socialist. It's actually refusing to bow down to the U.S. empire. That's its crime in the eyes of the imperialists.
Comes into a multifaceted of issues, because even if it wasn't X or it was Y, it still represents X in some frailty of another. The only way they would ever accept it to exist as X while still to exist representing X, like socialism or communism, is if that they had completely convolved to Y. They had changed so much that they're exactly in their ballpark, and even then, that only matters so long as you are sided with them still. So it is a two-way issue. It comes into what kind of threats you are to imperialism. I know you do. I'm just expanding on the point.
It would not even if Cuba was a hardcore capitalist nation, if they would still be freaking attacked by the United States because they refuse to freaking bow down to them. It doesn't matter.
More so, it's not about refusing to bow down. It's about the necessity of resources, because war doesn't happen because of supremacy. Supremacy happens because of necessity, and then war happens because of supremacy. The point I'm trying to make, you're basically already making the point that I made, is that this is why I nipped Falcone when she started trying to then do they're this or that, because it's now divulged us into this for no reason. Is what I was saying is, regardless of what they are, let's put that aside and just think of them as any capitalist third world nation, because we need to be supporting anti-imperialism before we can have our hokey dokey socialism. That's what my whole rant was about, is that we're not going to be able to start doing this whole 20th century thing where they thought they could just paint socialists across the map and pick and choose who they want. It's more of a, we need to go with whoever is against the imperialists. Whether that gets us who we want or not is a question of after we get the imperialists out, because it's not about who we want. I mean, who is preferable, because what we want doesn't matter. But the preferability isn't going to come while things are strangled. When people have fucking managed to revolt out, which are normally done by united fronts, so this idea that we're going to pick anyway would be idiotic, even if the Marxists had the lead, because they're not going to do it alone. You can't fight this alone.
I was going to say this. The other thing is this, as well as, they're also, they also might want to take that. The other reason why they want to take that down is because they want to basically hurt, another competing country's ally. Which basically that might be another reason as well, why the United States is also trying to get involved in Cuba as well.
Yeah,
because one, they want to hurt another ally, basically another ally of China, really. Because the other thing is this, it also has to dive into, what's the word for it? Inter-imperialist conflict. Is that the word for it?
You want about between two imperialist powers? Yeah, it's inter-imperialist conflict. I had a brain fart moment then. My mind just thought imperialist attacking itself. I don't know what the fuck was going on then.
Cuba, I personally see it as Cuba represents everything, about that America does not want in Latin America. Latin American countries, regardless how you feel about them, they look to Cuba, as an example, and they want Cuba to exist as it is right now as an example.
And also, that's
what it's That's what it's mostly about. Cuba is a symbol to Latin America that it is possible to, not to live under the boot of the Yankees, and the Yankees want to. Just destroy that symbol. That's what this all is about. Isn't it because it's socialist? They don't care about that. They do, of course, but what they mostly care about is giving hope to the people of Latin America that they don't have to live under U.S. domination.
Oh, and also to mention this as well as the other thing I was gonna say is this also basically the other thing is this, it messes with their dominance in the Caribbean. That's the other thing. Basically, even having like somebody in like your backyard that you would consider as an enemy, like that is like 90 miles away from you. It's like basically just gonna fuck with your plans in the Caribbean, really. They're just basically fucking with the Yankees' plans in the Caribbean, really. That's what's really one of the other reasons why they're even trying to get involved in fucking Cuba. And also, off topic, good news, we have no gusanos in the chat.
I'm surprised that again they might infest the comment section after the stream is over.
Oh yeah, remember like that 4th of July stream. Ugh.
Oh, speaking of which, have you been on Twitter, any of you?
No. I only seen
There's so many
shit.
there's so many bots on Twitter that are like
I've
talking,
seen the screenshots of these.
Like most of these accounts have no followers and they were created like within the past 24 hours.
I want to meet who's making the CIA's creepypastas because they're shit. Like whoever wrote the script, like whoever wrote the script for the propaganda film, the progressive one that they did at the start of the year, they should be doing the scripts for these creepypastas because there was more writing gone into that than there has all of these put together. Like normally it's just X issue, summit, and then bollocks, or they'll just go on about how the CIA is so great, and then they'll talk with someone else who's also a fucking CIA hack, and they'll talk with them about how the CIA is great. It's a mess. Oh, I forgot to grab 1 second. Fuck. Shit.
All right. Well, this is longer than I expected. I'm just gonna grab a drink really quick before I continue. Unless you have something to add, Falcone.
Oh, can I say this? The other thing I saw on 4th of July is these like so-called communists, like one from like another channel that I just call Red Fash. Literally, like they got mad on Dinky King's chat, and literally it was so funny. They were saying like a bunch of shit, like Happy 4th of July, and just doing a bunch of historical revisionism and shit like that. And then the other thing I also saw is this, where even other dangus were going after these like people like in Mango Press, where it's like, holy fuck, these people are really just preaching historical revisionism.
Okay.
I remember
Come on.
Okay.
Franco,
what does this have?
Falcon.
What does that have to do with Cuba?
Yeah, A, what does this have to do with Cuba? And B, it's my job to set things on fire and make everyone in the chat start hating each other, not yours. I'm joking.
Well, I always piss everybody off, not gonna lie.
I taught you well.
What does this have to do with the Cuba though?
Because we were talking about like 4th of July. That's what I was saying. We were talking about 4th of July. Not all shit.
Yeah, but you went like you did the tism, and you did a tangent within a tangent.
Yeah, that's the other funny thing.
But I mean, what's it? There's a better day to laugh about, and that's that time we burnt the White House down.
Yeah, can't wait to see that. Everybody with their little red books as well, and we just
fortunately the thing's made out of stone. Like we really didn't think about that. We burnt down a stone building. We are very smart. Unless it was a wooden building before then. Like I don't know.
Okay, let's be real regarding these worms or gorsanos. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Whatever you want to call them.
Gusana.
These people, they will. I don't believe they will succeed ever in their goals. They're fucking losers, and they have to depend on other people for their own success. They're fucking cucks, especially Ted Cruz.
I mean, the biggest time they threw their balls around, like the biggest time they ever like quote directly did something about it was when they sent their own fucking young men and fucking to go and die over there. They went like, all right then, we really want our land back, so we'll send our sons and all that over there. Like it's at the point where if they are going to risk their own skin, it still ain't going to be their own. It's I mean there were some older folk that went over there, but for the most part they just fucking send the lower halves of their families. It's these big rich families. Bear in mind they were given the chance to leave. Castro should have just sank the ships as they left. Australian foreign policy. Because I mean, that's what they do if fucking people try and sneak in or sneak off from the country. They'll just sink your boat and leave you in the ocean.
If there's one mistake Castro made, is he should have sank all their ships. I'm sorry. I hate these people. I mean, they're some of the worst human beings to ever exist in my country, or my country of birth, not country by choice anyway. And they vote for the worst policies. They support the worst policies. They will always side with the worst, members of our society. They always are on the wrong side of history. It's like, name a single issue where, these fucking, worms were ever on the side that actually supported real legitimate change anywhere. They're scum. They're worthless scum. To me, worms is a fitting, word for these fucking human fascist scum. That's what I see from most of these Cubans, and their descendants.
I mean, what you're looking at though fits in with it, because they got called worms after they wriggled between the fingers. They were allowed to leave, but they wriggled between the fingers. They slipped out at the hands of that society to leave, lawfully leave, go become a citizen elsewhere, refugee or whatnot. And yet they then had the cheek, the dirt, the disrespect to come and invade that land. But I mean, it's sort of one of them things that it comes into a sort of an issue, because you can't just shoot people. So you would have had to let people go anyway, because not all of them were capitalists. Like, as much as I hate the aristocracy, I'd rather us not just gun them all down or something like that. And if you selectively killed off the capitalists in that situation, you'd still create the aristocracy animosity enough that the US would fund them and they'd come over. So they did make the right decision in sending them off. And amongst their own people, it's not very good for the morale of your people to be massacring their own just after a revolution.
I know.
I'm not trying to criticize you. I'm more looking at my own points on this, because it's a hard one, because there's a harder way that things might have been able to be dealt with, but I don't know. I'd say I agree with the way Castro held things. Normally, Castro's always been one way he does okay. Like, he doesn't do the best, doesn't do the worst. He just kind of does okay. Here, it seems he's done exceptionally well. Then again, this was before he pissed Che Guevara off, so maybe he had a little of advice on his side.
Well, here's the thing. I respect Fidel Castro and what he managed to accomplish in his life. Honestly,
I do, but I can see how he held things back as well. I'm on Che's side of the situation.
Okay, I know. But no leader is above criticism. But considering what Fidel accomplished in his lifetime, what he managed to do, and how he led the Cuban people during, the hard times of the 1990s, I do think he deserves, credit.
He deserves credit, but he also deserves salt. It's one of them. It's like I would use the same quote that you used towards me against the situation. It's sort of, no leader is above criticism, and Castro is one of them ones. He's in that weird place. Like, I mean, getting old is one thing for Castro, and then it was also him being a sort of surface Marxist to a certain degree. But Castro aside, Cuban country, the solidarity of its people, that is something that is massively commendable across the board. They have a very similar taste in the mouth to them, what the DPRK has. Now, the DPRK ended up in a better situation based off their preconditions. They'd built up more for self-reliancy. But this is one of the things. If Cuba had that self-reliancy developed, they would have done so much better. Because the thing to take in that's so gobsmacking about Cuba is that they didn't have that self-reliancy set up, not at all. Complete opposite. They were codependent on the Soviet Union. When that gone, Cuba should not have survived. Not low chance. It should not have survived. The US, they were the same with the DPRK. It basically shut off any policy in trying hard with these nations. They just fucked with them. With the Koreans, they were cutting off the tails of oxes and other stuff like that. They were basically demobilizing their ability to still deal with agriculture. Whilst Cuba was an easier one. You just cut it off and watch it burn. There's no borders with anyone for anyone to help them. And these nations pulled through, albeit this having to devolve to a certain degree and such. It's that solidarity that drives me further, and hopefully that virulent solidarity of the people that can protect them against outside and inside forces. Because we all know that whether it's in its swing or not, a revolutionary country is always at risk from the out and the in.
Well, I don't. Well, the reason why I hold Castro with high esteem, despite many of the mistakes he made when he was leader of Cuba. I don't know if many leaders would have been able to do what Castro did, and have Cuba survive.
I don't attribute that to Castro because he's just one man. And
I know he's just one man. I know he's just one man, and one man, cannot do everything. But I'm just saying that I'd like to give Castro some credit for his leadership in those hard times.
No, I agree, but I give him bountiful amounts of credit. Sometimes I'd probably criticize myself as too much. No worries, Falcon. We'll catch you in a bit. My pointer towards it is that I'm more disappointed in the actions that were more so because he wasn't solid. Like, he wasn't solid on his ideology, and he was a bit flimsy in areas where he made active decisions that weren't mistakes, that weren't very good for the situation. I mean, some of which he's criticized himself. I could go into the economic ones, but I don't want to start like a dichotomy of war in the comments or anything like that. But the easy one to explain would be the one Castro criticized himself for, which was his homophobia. Other different bits like this. But no, I completely agree with you. Under his government, things pushed on virulently. But me being lumpen me, I gotta I'm always trying to blow really explosive darts. I know that sounded like a bit of a contradiction. You thought I was going to say poison darts, haha. But I like to blow explosive darts at the foundations we have, because it's not a problem of anyone. This isn't me trying to attack anyone that does this. I understand why this happens. I do it myself still. We give too much credit to the politicians. We give too much credit to the government and not enough credit to the people. That would be my position.
Well, that's true. I mean, Vidal was one man. The people he worked with, also are the reason why Cuba endured after the fall of the Soviet Union.
My criticism is still not them. It's the actual people on the ground, the people because regardless of what choices these people voted in power made, they were voted in power for one, and two, they don't take the brunt of what their mistakes cause.
Yeah. Well, I don't.
But I
think
agree with you.
I don't think I got much. I don't got much left to say, honestly, considering I'm reaching the 40-minute mark, and I don't want to. If it continues, this stream will devolve into something that's nothing to do with the actual stream is about.
I mean,
Cuba, is under attack, but I think they will endure. But I want to show solidarity to the Cuban people because, we live in a very dangerous time in human history, and I don't know what the United States, government is capable of. Honestly, I don't know what they will resort to, and we gotta stay vigilant.
Yes.
Regardless how we feel about Cuba and how its government is run, it is not up to us to dictate to the Cuban people how they build socialism.
It is, however, up to us for us to destabilize the possibilities of our nations going to war or oppressing or getting over them by disturbance, by getting the message out, by getting rallies built, by organizing mass amongst the people until it becomes such a scary situation that they have to focus on the home over the abroad.
I agree. If we want to help the Cuban people, to make it easier for them to keep their socialism or build socialism, whatever point of view you subscribe to, we have to lay off pressure on the country. Demand from if you're in America, especially Americans, we need to demand for these sanctions to end. They're inhumane. They're an act of war. And it doesn't affect the people in the government, it affects the Cuban people. The Cuban people are the ones that are suffering. Do not let these worms in Miami or and the few ones of Cuba that support the toppling of the current government, control the narrative. The Cuban people have suffered for 60 years under this brutal embargo. Hands off Cuba. No war with Cuba. Death to America. That's my final word. I'll let you end this stuff.
That's exactly right on, and it comes into a big provocation. So hands off are very big terms that we've already, I imagine a lot of people listening to this have heard thrown around already when it comes to Venezuela. And it's not just Cuba, it's not just Venezuela, it's not just Palestine, it's not just Iran, it's everywhere. Papua New Guinea, all these nations, Indonesia, hands off. And it's not just about hands off, it's not just about war with that, it's about the economics. And all of us, we've all heard of BDS at this point, I'm sure. Boycott something, sanctions, fucking everyone's gonna be like and shout in the middle letter at me now. But the point of that was what ended up, it wasn't actually what I ended up doing. The movement in South Africa did, but it was one of the things that we did in the first world to destabilize things, pushing towards pushing against the South Africa issue. This is a similar thing we need to do with Israel, with Cuba, with all the other stuff like that, not just BDS. This is what I'm talking about, is that we need to expand it from just the BDS of putting sanctions on a nation like Israel and combine that with the fact that all these nations that I've mentioned prior to talking about this situation here have all got sanctions on them. Take the sanction. We need to have it as a two-stage movement. We need to remove the sanctions of nations like Syria, nations like Cuba, nations like Venezuela, Iran, and put them sanctions on Israel. Like, fuck me. If you really want, I'd love people to say this. I'd happily say it myself. Put the entire economic weight of sanctions they have on every country around the globe on that one nation there and watch it last. Because they would never do it anyway, even if they were going to put sanctions on them. But you make such an abrasive, loud man opinion. You go so big to the par. Not only do they do it, but it's not as satisfying as what you've laid out for them, and goes to show them how massively futile their justification for these things are when you put the perspective onto a nation that the people of the first world actually consider to be human.
I agree. Solidarity to Cuba and the Cuban people. Long live the Cuban Revolution.
Yeehaw.